Hello, happy Friday Eve. It is like Friday, the second, not Friday, it's not Friday, the second Thursday, the second Friday Eve of December. There's only 3 more weeks in this year. It's like blows my mind. As you get here, tell me that you're there, say hello, and let me know in the comments. Rose and I are back here today um, looking at popping out. Okay, go ahead. I just saw your message. Rose is gonna disappear for a second. We're talking about offshore today. So I'm excited to have this conversation because I get this question a lot, and especially like in just circles of folks discussing, do you offshore? Why do you do that? Why don't you do this? What, all of the kind of the buzz in the marketplace, and then some of it's fear driven. We've talked about this like earlier in the year related to AI. So welcome back. Related to AI, and so I want to have this conversation related to humans and not computers. So yeah. So when you get here, let me know you're here and pop answer to the question of the day. Have you ever worked with an offshore company? Whether with healthcare or with any other organization, I am curious. Rose and I want to know and hear from you. And then later on, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experiences as well. So how are you today, Rose?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm hot. It's nice and warm out in Charlotte. I'm dressed
Same
for the
here.
weather. Not.
Yes.
Hey, Susan.
this lovely, what is it, 65, 68-degree weather we've had the last couple
Yeah.
days.
I'm like determined to wear my cozy sweaters because I like went shopping for new sweaters and somehow ended up with almost 70-degree weather today. So I'm totally okay with that. Not complaining because I love warm weather. I do. I know you said you're ready for the nice and cool weather.
I like the cool weather, but I don't like cold. I
Yeah.
don't want to be cold. I like to be cool.
Comfortable.
Like when you first get into the pool, you get adjusted to that pool water feel. That's
Oh,
the kind of feel I like. I don't want to be hot.
refreshing.
I don't want to be cold.
Refreshing. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Hey, Susan. Hey, Jerome. Welcome, Jerome from India. Yay! Yes, hope you're doing well too. We are. Thank you so much for the great wishes. And yeah, I'm excited. My girlfriend and I went for like a late night shopping spree last night. Um, and she was like, "I've never gone shopping this early," and I'm like, you know what? Honestly, I have never felt so far ahead shopping. I don't know if you're that person, Rose, like me, that just ends up no matter what somehow going to the store like during the last week.
Usually that's what happens, but right now I am done. I have everybody on my list done, but guaranteed I will find one thing that I forgot.
Mm.
So
Always that one item or that one person. You're
like
like,
an
oh my gosh, that person always buys me a gift, and I always forget to get them a gift. Yeah, and I'm not
mhm.
gonna lie, gift giving, like I am my gift giving or gift receiving really is not my love language. So I don't speak in gift. I am a quality time person. So I usually miss the mark of like, what's the perfect gift for you? And and I'm a practical gift giver. Like I want to give you something like
Mhm.
a planner or like a really cool calendar or like a
I'll take
water
it.
bottle or
I'll take it. Funny thing, I literally just bought myself one of those the water bottles that have the hourly thing on it because I know
oh,
I need to drink more water, and I was like, "Ooh,
interesting.
it's on sale." I got
Good.
that, and I was looking at planners for next year. So, I haven't bought
Christmas
one
shop
yet,
for
yet.
yourself. I love it. Hey, I have a really great question here from Facebook user. What do you mean by offshore? So, really great question. So, when we say offshore, we are talking about away from the United States. So, not necessarily just, I know a lot of people automatically jump to the experience of maybe India or the Philippines, but there are actually a lot of offshore companies that have been born in other Latin American countries. And I've spoken to some folks in is it St. Thomas? I think it's St. Thomas. Which one's the one that's not American? I think it's St. Thomas. I've spoken to some folks on islands like close to the U.S., but they're not a part of the U.S., so we consider that offshore. Typically in healthcare, we use two different terms to refer to location, whether it's in the US or not in the US. And that term is offshore for folks outside of the US and stateside when you are in the US. So I hope that answers the question. So, and Susan says, worked with offshore calling Anthem. Yes. Most of the insurance companies have their companies their support, their soft. Hey, hey, doll. We have a visitor. No, you're good. Most of the offshore companies have most of the insurance companies have their support teams, customer service support teams in other countries. So other countries other than the United States. So yeah, I hope that clears it up and you understand kind of what we're talking about there. And yeah, I want to know, have you worked with people before
No, you go to your own.
that are in other countries? Let's see. I'm looking at some other comments here. Yay. So today we're having a conversation because Rose actually is somewhat new to offshoring in a successful way, we'll say. And I've actually been in the world of offshoring. It's been probably 12 years in business. That's like, it really blows my mind to say that because she's like, it just flies by. I think about like, oh my gosh. But yeah, because it was around 2010 or so, the first time that we really considered the idea of sending any kind of aspect of the business offshore. And initially it was very uncomfortable. Actually, I even had the company that I first started with, that I first partnered with, call me out because on my website, this 10, 15 years ago, I had a comment about like basically keeping the business here and all US based and very, kind of not, I wouldn't say in an insulting way, but more like, we're all here. And he's like, hey, you kind of, you have some misinformation on your website. And I thought that's fine. I mean, I hadn't really ever, I hadn't revisited the website or that area of the website. And I thought it was really important to make it clear that on my understanding and my stance now. So yes, thank you. That's what I thought. Yay. Yeah. Yes, I appreciate. Yes, I love that you say that. Yes, we all know what happens when we assume. Yes. One of my first bosses in healthcare actually literally called me into his office and painted that on his whiteboard for me, like the word assume. And it was a lesson I will never forget. I think I was 19. So
I actually got that in high school. I was a sophomore. The teacher wrote it out on the board and he's like, you know what they say about when you assume? And I said, the whole class was like, what are you talking about? And he literally wrote it out.
I bet you guys got a kick out of that though, like laughter because, that it's your teacher, like, with a curse word on the board, right? It's like,
oh yes, it was funny. It was funny. But it was a lesson I never forgot.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It sticks with you, right? It sticks with you.
Really
so,
does.
So Rose, let's talk a little bit about your story down the path of offshoring. I'm curious, just from previous experience.
So, the company that I worked for before joining Inlera, joining our company, we attempted to use an offshore service, and it lasted, I think, at most 6 months, maybe a little longer. Not much. We didn't even make it a full year. And then COVID happened, and we didn't use them again. They didn't pick it back up. So, it was just, we didn't get time to really get them to know the ins and outs of how our company wanted things done. And we were all brand new to it. None of us had ever used an offshore. Even the owner of the company had ever used an offshore company before. So it kind of left a bad taste in some of some of their mouths, and I'm guessing the owner of the company, it left a bad taste in theirs as well because he just didn't pick it back up.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. What does success look like? A little bit later on in the conversation. What does the success look like partnering with an offshore team? Because I think there are a lot of missing elements in most of the billing company's operational where the billing company's operational stance is when you look to partner with any company. I don't care if the company is here in the US, if they're focused around what's typically called or used to be called, affectionately called BPO, which is business process outsourcing. If you are a company devoted to business process outsourcing, there is a really important word in that acronym, which is process. You first have to have a very clean and clear process before you can consider yourself able to be successful with the business process outsourcing company. And I not to say that it's impossible that you could find a company that can help you along the way, but part of that you have to have a pretty clear process or procedures at least in place for things that you want done and how and why and all that. So we'll talk a little bit of that later because I think that's great. So I think, let me ask you this question, Rose, because I'm trying to think back when we had our first few interviews. Did we share during the first or second interview with you that we partner with an offshore team?
You did.
Okay.
You did.
Good.
And
or not me, Chris or whomever.
And to be honest, whenever we first used them, and I actually, after figuring out what it was that their job was to do and how, and of course it wasn't something that anyone could really explain to me, but communicating with members of the offshore team that we were working with, eventually I figured out what they were supposed to, and I actually enjoyed working with them. And
I'm sorry, can you say that again? What did you say again?
I enjoy it.
Yeah,
It's actually it's a very nice service to have if your company chooses to utilize it.
Yeah, I
and
love
utilize
that.
it properly.
And I didn't pay her to say that, I promise. She wanted to share that information. She wanted to share that. I told her that we were talking about this, and I was like, you should probably talk about your experience. I think it's important, like, for people to know, like, having had one or two poor experiences in the past based on whatever circumstances doesn't mean it needs to scathe the experience. It could have just been that particular situation. Like, I don't know the previous company and where they were, when you were looking to partner with that organization. And sometimes, we go in with this illusion that, well, they're experts in revenue cycle, or they're experts in, in billing. And so they should know, it's like all that, Tony Robbins, one of my favorites, says, people are always shooting all over themselves. They're always, they're always saying, you should this and you should that. And they should know this already. Like, it's back to the word assumption, right? It's like assuming. Don't assume anything. You have to make sure you train people properly and you equip them. And then you also have to CYA, right? You've got to make sure you protect your business and make sure you have all of the right controls in place to make sure, just like you would if you hired someone stateside, you have to make sure you understand what successful performance looks like. What does, not just good, what is great, what is excellent, like what are the levels you're willing to accept as you bring them into the fold? And, well, they're getting acclimated. Okay, here's what I can expect. And here's a rate of success that we can anticipate. And then we start to see, okay, like 3 months later, here's the percentage, the accuracy rate. There's all kinds of different other metrics that I don't want to talk too far into right now, but basically looking at how well they are doing the job and deciding, is it meet the standards that you're setting? And do you even have standards? That's another question, right? Do you even have standards? So yeah, let me see. I have a couple of, oh yeah. Okay. So I do want to talk about, I want to talk a little bit about my perspective, because I told you guys, it's been 12 to, I don't know, somewhere between 10, 15 years. Cause my first experience with a company, very, very first experience with a company was rocky. But at that time, there were a lot of things quite different in healthcare. Things like ERAs, the electronic remittance advices, and EFTs were still just really kind of coming into like the daily, where we were seeing them on a regular basis. Majority of our payment posting process was still happening manually. So for us, the number one thing was to speed up the payment posting process and do our best to keep the accuracy the way that it at the level that it needs to be maintained. And so that was the first thing that I considered outsourcing because it made financial sense. It's like you really, let's just be honest, it's a data entry position, right? So it is very entry level, and it's great to give someone the opportunity that's brand new to healthcare. But at some point, people will graduate to the next thing, to maybe they start getting interested in other aspects of revenue cycle. So you really do need to have more people involved in that process to keep it smooth and consistent. And the reality is there is no return on the investment when it comes to payment posting, because that literally just produces the work for us as billers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It tells us, here's your denials, here's your, it gives us the work. And so it is part of the process, the revenue cycle process. And let's just be totally honest here, like, healthcare has a long way to go for things to be squeaky clean in the process. Most practices, most software, there's way too much manual intervention still required to get the payments to be successful. And so payment posting was just busy work, to be frank, right? There at this time, because ERAs were brand new, or somewhat new, we'll say, and new to most software companies being able to ingest them, meaning like bring them into the software and process them electronically. Like that is the that is the hardest part of trying to get them to understand, like, there is an opportunity for us to leverage. I lost my thought. It just completely blanked my brain. Like I'd like that for us to leverage the expertise of a biller and not bog us all down with busy work. Okay.
Right.
And so Rose, like things that you do on a day to day, like let's talk about the types of things that you spend most of your time on, from day to day, just like kind of the bird's eye view of like the types of stuff that you're doing.
Well, let's go to my handy dandy list, shall we? So a lot of my day is we utilize our company uses a lot as a try this again utilizes a ticketing system, which is how we get Offshore communicates to us. There's denials that need to be worked in some way. And that's where a bulk of my day is just doing that part. A lot of it is stuff that, they can, a lot of what I am working on is stuff that needs a higher level. If it's something that needs to have an appeal done or whatnot, that's one of those things that I would rather do myself to make sure it is done properly, and in the correct way, especially for whichever insurance that denial is coming from, versus just sending a corrected claim or something. That's it's Offshore takes a lot of that.
Busy
I
work.
don't want to say it in a bad way. It's not menial, but they take a lot of the lesser stuff out of the way, so that way we can see the forest through the trees. If that makes sense.
You get the meat, you leave the bones. That's what yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that too. And actually, is it Luis has a really great point.
And also answering questions from the providers and so forth as well. That's mostly the bulk of my day. It's not always. I'm not really calling for the claim statuses or things like that. The smaller things that others can handle. I'm handling the ones that need an upper level.
Right. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So things like claim submission, like electronic claim submission. Do you do anything like that? Do you go through and like submit the claims?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, when I say that, like the bulk of the batching and stuff, like batching of the claims.
Not so much. I don't do the big bulk of the batching.
You do
That's something
resubmissions, right?
I do resubmissions.
Yes.
Or if there was something that might have gone wrong with that batch, I go in there and I'll figure out what the problem was. So I call it claims fix. It's whatever other people call it, different things. But I do my claims fix, and that's where again you go in there and you see what was wrong with the claim, whether it be rejected in the clearinghouse or it just didn't batch out from your software to your clearinghouse. That's part of what I do, but the bulk of the batching and stuff is not handled by me.
Right. Do you put charges in for clients?
I do not.
Yeah.
I do not.
Do you put demographics in for clients?
Rarely.
Rarely.
It's one of those rare things.
Yeah.
That's more for the offshore.
Yeah. So, and Luis has a great point there. That's exactly the kind of stuff that we do not, we don't bog down. Here's the structure, just so you guys understand, that I like to follow. So our folks who are experienced, that have higher level knowledge in the world of appeals and fighting for claims, they spend time on the meat. They spend time on the fighting for the claims. They're working on what can I do to make sure that the team that does some of the follow-up, the more busy work, like Luis's point there, calling to understand the denials, that's research that needs to be done, but it is busy work. Really what Rose and what we call our team leads, what they are working on, a lot of other companies call them account managers. They aren't working on, let me find out the reason for the now. They're working on like, let me get the fix. Let me actually find the solution, not just what's the general cause. The AR teams, like the first level teams, the data processing teams, the ones who make sure that the claims go out on a regular basis, we send all of that to our offshore partner. So, and the reason for that is because it's a nonstop machine, a nonstop machine. And
constant.
yeah,
I think I mentioned that in the last time I was on. Data entry, theirs is limited, but follow-ups and that kind of thing, that can go on for months or years after data entry is done.
Yeah. The bottom line, when we have these kinds of this kind of support, it keeps us really narrowly focused on doing the work that we were hired for. And it also doesn't bog down the resources. I've seen so many times when we've onboarded clients, and even, in years past when things were heavily manual, where literally the biller, like the person who was the biller in the practice or the whatever, their job was spent, 90% of their job was spent on that busy work because they didn't have time. Like the volume's so high, they're working on getting the claims out the door, they're working on payment posting, they're doing all of this stuff that has to get done. What'd you say?
I said, I feel that in my soul.
Yeah, it's so painful. And you're like, and I always love to say this, is that there are specific strengths that someone who has an affinity to fighting for a claim, like appealing and sitting reconsiderations, like that team and team member is a different brain than someone that is going to spend the day coding or spend the day payment posting or charge posting. Not to say that it can't be the same person, but it's a very unique person, for that individual to feel fulfilled and like passionate about both sides. So Lee, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in forever. Hi. So hi, Amon. Let's see. I work in claims denials and our client. Oh, okay. I love it. That's awesome. All right. So hi, Lee. Long time no see, stranger. Great to see you. So I want to just say that like a lot of the passion that somebody has for someone who's doing data entry, they are like passionate about like, I want to get this done as fast and as accurately as possible. All about speed, like got to get it done 100% accurate, as close to that as possible, right? That individual is a different programming in their mind than someone who wants to research something deeper to make sure that they know how to craft the perfect, appeal letter or reconsideration request. Those kinds of individuals think differently. Excuse me. And it's not to say one is right or wrong. They're just different. They're just different people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to really think about, do I have a balance on my team where I'm leveraging people's areas of strength and where they most excel? And if not, if you need to separate the two and you have multiple people now in your department or on your team, is it cost effective? Because now we have one person that's focusing only on payment posting and they're still behind. So we really need like 3 or 5. I mean, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a monster if you're doing it accurately. Like Rose was mentioning, we pull from out of our EOB, every single EOB and ERA that comes in, denials get pulled into a system for them to be worked. And I don't know, I don't want to say anal retention, but we are pretty, like, we like to make sure.
We're very detail oriented.
Detail oriented. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we prefer to make sure that we touch the denials before they land on the AR when possible. Now, there's going to be claims we won't hear back from, or we still haven't been able to get an issue resolved that ends up on the AR report. But if we can, prevention is the name of the game, right? To keep it from starting to age. So it's really important to like think about ways that you can leverage. What can I get done faster, like payment posting, getting the claims out faster, getting all that stuff done faster, more accurately, so that I don't have all this downstream mess. And then you focus on improving, right, Rose? I mean, that's kind of where we are. Like, we're constantly like, what do we do? How do we make sure that the team is more equipped? Right?
We literally just had a meeting this week where we were conversing with the heads of our offshore team about things that we feel we could tweak and make better and make more efficient. That works better, not just for one particular provider, but across the board.
Absolutely.
And yes, so it's always an ever-changing type thing.
Hey, newbie. That's cute. It's funny because it's like, is your name Snoopy, or is it because you're a newbie? I don't know. I haven't met you before, so you're a newbie to me too. A tribe. I haven't seen you in a while. Yay! Welcome back. Welcome back, Rose. So I'm really finished my story about how I actually how that worked out. So that first company we worked with, things were messy, partly because we were doing a lot of manual data entry. We did have a process for scanning at that time, but it was not perfect because this is 10 to 15 years ago. Scanners were not as efficient as they are now. So we had kind of like a messy process where some of our clients would fax things way more than they do the electronic, scanning and sending it to us in our help desk now. But there was faxing. We actually don't get none of our clients fax things now. Thank goodness for that. But back then it was it was a big mess. It was like, did we get all the papers? I mean, it was e-fax. I think it was probably e-fax back then too. But it just was a messier process. So I take ownership that the first company probably could not have been as successful with payment posting without, I mean, they could have been more successful if we had a lot more electronic opportunity for them to do that, to really kind of get their fingers in and do it right. Our first company learned. They did a great job, and then they wanted more. They were like, give us more. We can learn AR. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then I said yes, and we tried it. It was an epic fail. It was bad, like really bad. I learned the hard way. It was bad. That was it. It was really bad.
Did it put a bad taste in your mouth towards offshore for a while?
It did. For a while, we didn't do, I probably would say another 6, maybe even 6 or 7 years before we even considered trying something other than data entry and insurance verifications. That we did do some insurance verifications back then. We don't do that now, but that was the only those were the only areas that we were okay with working with an offshore team, because it was painful, and it was one of those things where you're like, I never want to have the client impacted, right? And
Mhm.
so when you start trusting another company, and it was part of this at this time was mostly all like Excel spreadsheets and like all this stuff that you're just kind of like, this is an update and here's another update. Just all was all just messy and disjointed. And
Mhm.
so we didn't have a clean process at that time that was electronic. Again, back to technology being leveraged. It wasn't easy back then. And so let me see what questions we have here. So our
It's funny
biller.
that you were
Go
saying
ahead.
that kind of thing. I've got a little story about it. Well, not really a story, but a little
Yeah.
tidbit on that.
Yeah, let's see if we answer Lee's question here. This is a separate topic, but let's see. Are billers supposed to process out-of-network facilities claims? It's to my assumption that the facility is not credentialed with certain insurances. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking if we should process claims when the facility is not in network with or provider, I imagine, not in network with the insurance company. Yes, you should if they ask you to, if that's the request, because there are patients that have out of network benefits. And do you have something to add to that, Rose?
Well, I was going to say yes. Definitely, if your provider wants you to send it in, sometimes even the patients want you to send it in. If it's it could be either or. Um,
Mhm.
they may not have the out of network benefits, but sometimes you just have to get that denial, whether it be the provider wants it or the patient wants it. Or in all honesty, a lot of providers, if they know they are out of network with an insurance, they tell the patient up front, we're not in network with them, we don't accept it, and they make them a self-pay patient.
Right away. Yeah, right away. And there's a whole other discussion to be had around the out of network and like surprise billing and how all that comes into play. I don't want to
Mhm.
like go too far down the rabbit hole there because I could talk a while about that. But there are requirements if the patient has elected for you to send the claims in, and or if you're treating that patient and they have a coverage that they want you to bill first, it would really just be right for you to send in the claim on their behalf. And in some
Mhm.
states actually require that to be done, whether you're in or out or network. Um,
Mhm. It
oh, I
also
like this
depends
is a
on too
good.
if they have a second insurance. If they have a second insurance, secondary insurance, and the secondary insurance is in network, you're still going to have to bill that primary insurance just to get the denial to send it to secondary.
Yes. Yes. Fantastic point. There are a lot of patients that have the primary, secondary, even tertiary, where they might not have benefits applicable to the organization from their first company, but you got to get it down that line.
Mhm.
So the patients are supposed to call themselves. Okay. So from a follow-up perspective, it really depends on the organization, whether they want you to follow up on claims that are out of network once it's been determined that there are no benefits. Like some, so when I say that, I mean like EOB's been received or ERA, and the team has applied because the EOB said patient is liable. Team has applied that to patient responsibility. Every organization is different. Like what happens at that after that point, after that moment of determination, it really is something that the organization can make a call on, so to speak, because they can set their own policy on it. Like if they decide that they're no longer wanting to incur expenses towards those claims, they can decide that their team is not going to fight for the claim processing because it's been determined it's applied to patient. But that's kind of an organizational decision there. So I get a tribe. You asking a really good question there. Yeah, asking a good question. I want to answer it. I'm gonna pause for 1 second because I want to talk, I guess, about the path to us starting with an offshore company that was successful, and how things changed. So back then, way back then, when we thought we wanted to work with offshore, or we thought it would be okay to work with offshore for follow up and accounts receivables at that time, process processes were there, but they were very loose around AR, right? Around follow up. And that's very common because we typically, organizational leaders especially, are like, well, we'll just bring in experts and they'll know what to do. But they don't always create a workflow that is something that folks can embody well, right? To say, okay, here's all the accesses you need. Here's the resources. Here's my expectations for when you need to follow up on X. A lot of organizations, and those of you who are in billing right now can speak to this. I'd love to hear your input. You have an expectation of X number of claims that you have to touch per day, and you have a work queue that has X number of claims in it every single day. And sometimes that's it. You get there and you're the one who's responsible for kind of organizing and structuring your day and what that looks like. And sometimes it's every day, it's like the same thing. You're working your work queue and you're just going down the list. And there isn't necessarily kind of a rhyme or reason that they have told you. You might be strong enough in your billing skills to create it, but they haven't given you direction on recommendations or say policies on how they want it touched, right? So that's why a lot of companies don't touch denials first. They might not have a team that works denials, or anybody that says denials take priority, because they just are like, well, we've got payment posting and then it goes right to the AR team, and that's it, right? And I love it when people do that, because it's like, that you've got rejections, you've got denials, you've got like all this stuff in the middle that really should be worked first, because that's the way this revenue cycle runs, right? So, Rosa, do you want to add anything? I'm going to look at
where the way you were just explaining that. The company I worked for previously, we had the payment posters, we had insurance verification, claims entry. And then, it came down to me. And payment posters would post payments. They'd print off the EOB. If it was a paper EOB, they'd print it off. And then they would put it in a box behind my head. And when it came to AR, before I would even start my report, I would pull those EOBs. I'd work those denials. And then I would print, because that's the way we did it at the company there, I would print that AR report and then start working things. Because if you go ahead and work that stuff, it takes quite a bit out of your way when you do your AR report.
I wish I could have an applause sound going on right now, because that is precisely the reason why, when I said prioritizing and not forgetting that, the rejections and the denials exist, is because you already have the evidence as to why. You already have pretty much everything that you could need as far as information, like the insurance carrier telling you the reason for them not processing your claim in that payer rejection or the denial. So going through your AR report and researching your claim, you're wasting your time. You have the evidence. They have told you why.
Yep. It's absolutely wonderful, because the way the way our system works now compared to what I was used to, it makes it a lot easier. It actually makes the AR report a bit more manageable, at least for me. I'm hoping it does for the AR team as well. But when I go to work that AR report, it's nowhere near as big, because I've got all those denials, in my workflow, in our ticketing system, and I can go back in and work those. And that's where a lot of my day is. It's in that denial workflow, in that ticketing. Not so much on the actual AR report. Whereas where I worked previously, and keep in mind, our company doesn't do just the paper EOBs, what's sent in from our provider. They're also doing the electronic ones. So they are going through each of those as well, and we're getting that denial information.
Right.
That's how we have our company has made it to where it's the AR report's more manageable. Whereas where before it was so huge, because I was having to go through all of the electronic payments that had all the claims that would be processed electronically and come back in through an ERA. Didn't have that paper box behind my head. It was literally on that paper AR report.
Yeah, that's so good.
I
And
didn't
Rosie,
know about a denial until it was on my report.
right? Yeah, I mean, and it's so much later, especially if you're working, I mean, something that you got a response on an ID, like for example, right? It's like ID is not, now you might have multiple visits. Time has may have, already passed where you could have gotten to that right away. You could have gotten that right turnaround right out the door if you found out that information. Date of birth is not right. All the various things that we deal with related to basic demographic stuff that can be resolved very, very quick. And Rose pointed out something perfect, actually, that box behind her head. That box behind her head where she's talking about where the payment posting team would make copy to EOBs. That is actually exactly where I got the idea of the help desk from a lot of years ago. Is exactly from that, because most organizations, we are accustomed to having like a lot of inboxes all around, like especially back in the day from legacy billing, is like, you had paper EOBs, payment poster was going through a big old stack, and they would take out that stack, or you would put little post-its to kind of pin it. And so with the team that works these right now, is literally they capture it as they move along. Now, the reason why we do that in a more manual way is because not all of our software systems have the ability to do it electronically. We do work off of multiple platforms. So what we needed is a system that can kind of level the playing field and make sure everything runs smoothly, so we're not dealing with the gaps, struggling, I should say, with the gaps that our software has. So I hope that answers the question, a tribe. I put it up there because we were going to kind of talk about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more too. So the denial resolution process. So there's a couple of things. There are very clear instructions. Yes. Very clear instructions that the team has, rules, literally, for payment posting teams that have rules that say, here's what needs to happen when you see this denial or that denial or this comment, right? So we make sure that they know the situations in which we expect that you put this denial in our workflow. And then we also, on the other side of that, like, we don't want a bunch of denials that shouldn't be there. Like Rose and I talk about this all the time, because always like, what else can we eliminate? Like, what else can we shave off? Right? Excuse me. Like ones that we know are what we would consider proper denials or anticipated denials. We make sure that the payment posting team knows, like, you send this particular procedure code to Medicare with this modifier, you're going to see this code. We know that code is going to be there. Do not put this code in the denial workflow, right? So those are like rules that have to be assigned. And yes, like cheat sheets from the perspective of like, here are the most common things that we see for this code from this carrier from this region. And you can build that, it can happen as you go. If you partner with the right company, they might be able to help you build that, kind of work side by side. If you don't already have that, I wouldn't say like pause and like stop business, so to speak, and build it. It's something that will be more successful if you do it as the business is moving, because you really need to learn from information that's coming across every day. Do you have anything?
Right. And to him, talking about the cheat sheet for denials, something else that we have implemented was we have SOPs for a lot, and it is basically cheat sheets to help, especially if they're not quite sure of what process to do. If it could be, again, just entering the field. I not long after I started, I presented Jasmine with basically a script for our team to use when they called insurances, and said, okay, well, if they tell you, let's just say the claim was denied, here's what you need to do. If the claim has been paid, here's what you need to do. If the claim has been partially paid, here's what you need to do. That way the team would know exactly what questions to ask to push to get all the information they need in less calls.
Yes, exactly. Getting right to the heart of it, because sometimes, and anybody really, whether you're offshore or not, if you're new to healthcare, it's very confusing, because the insurance company is the representatives, especially when you get on the phone with them, they are reading off of a screen. So they seem very sure about their answer because it's there, right? It's in front of them. And so they might come to you with a very certain answer, a certain response that seems, believable, so to speak. And so you have to teach and train the team on how to combat that. And I guess I should mention a little bit more about, because Rose has mentioned about the AR team. So we do have a lot of our different aspects of our team that's supported by our offshore partner, whom we absolutely adore. Like the next company that I worked with after we got a lot more systems in place, checklist, processes for tracking production, like understanding what do we expect you to touch per hour, per day? Like what is reasonable? Because sometimes people set targets that either are not reasonable or they're not really clear. It's like if you say you're 60 claims or 80 claims a day, well, the bottom line is this: if you are working on an appeal process, like let's say, you've got a full AR, let's old school it, okay? You got 150 pages of an AR report. Realistically, you might get through 125 of those in a breeze. You'll get through your target, whatever. The last 25 of those claims or pages that you're working on for your AR report, those could be the slowest moving claims because of the complexity. It could be something that you are just spending hours on, to be honest, something that, you're, especially, we have some surgeons, right? So it's like, if you're writing a very complex, you're reading documentation, you're making sure you've got all this extra information to support the reason for them to reconsider this claim. It's going to take you more time. You got to do a little bit more research. Maybe you're looking on websites, trying to get more ammunition to fight for that claim. It's going to slow you down. So it's important to be real about, okay, when you're in the front part of the AR cycle, where you're just evaluating the AR report, right? That back in the day, I joke, we used to, with our highlighter sit, Rose and I we joke around talk about their same process. Old school, print out the reports to get your highlighter out, 4 different colors of highlighter.
Different issues.
Exactly. All these different colors of a highlighter. You're going to go through your report and kind of classify the issues up front. And that is essentially what we leverage. We've trained our team to do. So they'll be able to say, okay, we're going on the website. We're just checking the status. Claims in process. We're happy. They're checking the clearinghouse. Claims good. Everything's going through smooth. Like the team, a team lead doesn't need to touch those items because it's still busy work, right? It's just going out to the software and kind of reviewing. And so it's a little less complicated than what someone who does follow up. Go ahead, Rose.
I'm so sorry. I was thinking about it too. Even though we do let offshore handle the bulk of it, we still go back and spot check. I mean, that's just a way of CYA. You go back and you spot check. And it kind of links to one of the comments that Lee made right there, was we weren't scared. Jasmine she can attest to this because it's something I'm still working on. I was so used to having to micromanage each of my accounts, each claim, doing every step of this follow-up of the AR, that it's hard for me now to still let go. I still have issues with it. So I can completely understand where Lee's coming from, but you have to make yourself kind of give a little trust. And especially with being that I've been with Inlera, she's had this same company for years. She trusts them. So I have to make myself, okay, I'm going to have to make myself trust them. So that's why I give my input and I see how they do things and we just kind of compare them. And I'm like, that's how we find out what's going to work best.
Right. And I want to talk to this discussion around compliancy. It's hard to have a short, sweet answer to this. I'm going to say there's really important, if you're talking about from a perspective of like business ownership, Lee, just to answer the question on the HIPAA piece of this, is you have to make sure that you have chosen the right company, one that really understands what it means to be compliant, and they themselves have their own accreditations or training that they are performing in-house, so that you want them to also be providing their team with compliance training. The reality is this: is whether you have a team here in the US, whether you have a team member down the hall from you, you cannot, you would use the same, what is the word? The same process, I would say, for evaluating
Same
whether or not
practices.
the same practices, thank you, for compliancy, right? So it doesn't matter if they're here or they're in I'm saying here, like if they're in North Carolina with you in the same office, or in California, or in, in another country, right? In India, we've talked about earlier, like if they're in another offshore, in another country, it doesn't matter. You're still going to make sure that you understand whether or not they understand what it means to be compliant, like the individual means, and then what the company has committed to as far as training, and perhaps additional accreditations and other licensing that's available. When you talk about suing someone for making a mistake, there isn't a lot of, they say this, there's not an opportunity for you to do that, even with a company that's here stateside, in a lot of instances, because the suing part of that, like when it comes, it's usually something that is written into a contract that's prevented. So I don't want to go too far down the path there, but essentially there's this concept of errors and omissions, right? That says we are capable of having issues and errors. You want to make sure that the company has the ability, insurance wise, or the ability to compensate, and that you have insurance if you're an individual business. There's a lot more that I could say about this if you're talking about it from a company perspective, but you have to make sure that you're covered, whether, again, it's someone here in right down the hall from you that made this mistake, or that started selling credit card information, or all that stuff is possible, whether here or offshore, it's all possible. So it's really important that you think that, like, it's apples to apples. Yes, you don't have control over an individual doing something, but you also don't have control over that individual doing something when you're not in the office physically, right? So there is an element of trust, and there's an element of also just instilling proper practices of what it means to be compliant, and getting the right partnerships with attorneys, the right partnerships with compliancy training companies, and maybe organizations as well that you can kind of put as intermediaries in that relationship between you and the offshore company. So I don't want to talk too much about that, because it literally could go on for a long time. That's a really great question though. But it's something that you should ask whether you work with an offshore company or not. That's my point there. So I love it. You guys have so many great questions. I love these questions today. Want to be natural.
They're really good ones.
Hey. Great to see you. I love seeing the familiar names. I haven't seen some of you in a little while, so I love seeing your names pop up. Thanks for coming back and hanging out with us. What's the best way to charge for? Okay, this is a question, Lee, that I'm going to put on the screen so folks know what I'm reading on other platforms. We'll have to talk about this another episode, because it's a big question. It's a big question. I would say it really depends on the opportunity. Most cases, you're going to do an evaluation that is an hourly rate first, because you need to understand whether there is value in the opportunity before you decide to do a percentage, because a percentage of zero is zero. If you can't recover anything, you'll be. So how do you live? How can you do a live with a workflow? Oh, that's good. Yeah, we could totally talk about our workflow. I don't mind putting it out there. You guys listen, like I know that I'm a total open book. Like I love sharing this. And unfortunately, most people, don't take the time to like implement this type of important stuff. So I'd love to share it, and hopefully you can make the time to implement it. So yay. Awesome. Let's say it sounds like per hour, because it's special claims.
I'm curious about a tribe's coming to do a live with the workflow. Now, are you wanting to know exactly what it is we do per day, or how we, as a person, choose to do the work, how we choose to prioritize? That's my question.
Yeah, a tribe. If you elaborate, so we can make sure we answer that question in another live for you properly. Thank you, Rose, for mentioning that. Let's see. Just spent 2 hours between insurance company. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go. Yep. One payer.
That's about 6 hours on one claim.
Yeah. That's
It's not
exactly the reason why, production. Now, I'm not, making an excuse for someone who has consistently very low production. Like there's just some people that are just not made, let's just be honest, that are not made to do this work because
Mhm.
this is the bottom line. You got to have someone who knows how to research, okay? But you also have
Mhm.
someone who knows how to close, right? It's like the goal is resolution. So you
Mhm.
don't want them to get so stuck in research mode that they don't feel comfortable enough to close. Being honest, it's like
Something, yeah.
you gotta make
Something
sure they
else,
know how to resolve.
something else too. And I know most employers are understanding. Everybody has bad weeks. Everyone has bad days or whatnot. Where what you normally produce to what you put out this week is not the same at all. I'm having that week right now. What I am producing, and it just happens. Sometimes you just can't get it. But the key is to, you implement your workflow.
Mhm.
Work that workflow. Work however. Some companies provide that for you. I know the last two companies I have worked for have provided me what they expect out of the day.
Yeah.
As long as you are getting that workflow done and you are putting in that effort, it you will succeed.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for mentioning that. That's a really, really powerful point. And Jacqueline says about the, insurance and agreement. Yes. So, errors and omissions, in case you missed that earlier, when I said, that's what we were talking about there. Jacqueline, you asked this question. I want to help. But I'm not sure how do we obtain offshore clients, meaning like offshore relationships or maybe I should know where you are. Are you in the US and you're looking for, like, now that I say that, is it the other way around? Are you offshore? Are you not in the US? Maybe let me know if
Mhm.
I'm so I can answer that question for you properly. So yes. No, we were talking about SOPs.
Okay.
Okay. Love it. Yep. SOPs. So a tribe. Yes. SOPs. Okay. The magic, again, I'm going to reiterate this in case you weren't here at the beginning of the show. The magic of having a successful relationship with an offshore team is process. The
Mhm.
concept of offshoring, outsourcing, all of that comes from a term that was birthed, I don't know, maybe like 3 decades ago now. That's called BPO, or business process outsourcing. BPO, or business process outsourcing, says what it is in its name, but it's really important that you understand the importance of the word process in that
Mhm.
in that phrase. And so when someone is learning, this goes really for anything, whether someone's coming in to work in your business right next door to you. Like, you might not have the process in place right now, but you got to help build one with
Mhm.
that individual. You have to, in order for them to know that they're what success look like. What does success looks? Gosh, I cannot get that out. What does success look like? You have to know what that is, but in order to do that, you've got to sit down and really organize yourself. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, I love it. We're going to talk about that on a different
Yes.
episode. I think it's
And again, our company gave me
gonna
for the position that I am currently in, gave me an SOP, and you build off of that.
I
So
love it.
you build off of that, and you utilize it, but you also make it your own.
Exactly. I'm all about that. Like for me, I literally call it a
Taking
recommended
ownership
workflow. It's like, yeah,
and
it's a
taking
template,
ownership of it.
right?
I've
Because
heard her say that so many times. Take ownership of it.
yay, thank you for celebrating that.
Thank
It's like
you.
I always joke, like, I'm giving you this template, right? It's like,
Mhm.
but you take all of your experience and you add to it, and then it takes that template and it takes it to the next level.
Mhm.
And the next level, as you start to learn and feel comfortable and confident in the software that might be new, or all those things. Like, it's not that, okay, you've got to follow my process to the T. The bottom line is this: is like, I want you to follow the process,
Mhm.
but I want you to take it and kind of turn it up a little bit, like make it a little
Yep.
better. Like, I don't want you
And
to go
if
the
you
other
can make
direction.
Mhm.
Don't
And
make
if
it
you can make
worse.
it better,
Make it better.
share it with, and again, You share it with the offshore team. You share with them what it is that you're expecting them to do each day, and give that to them. They can build off of it and find ways that work for them that will still be in compliance, Lee.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
can definitely do it, especially if you have the right company.
So good. Lee has a really funny point here about the looks like you need to have a third party company do the old dates. You know what? There are companies out there that will support you in that workflow. I would still suggest though, before you even like entertain it, do a real evaluation first, like offer a quote that is realistic, that says, here's how long it's going to take me to just look at it. And, the evaluation process or the assessment, initial assessment, you can get, your offshore team, if you have one that you're partnered with, to assist you in that, to evaluate where things stand and to decide if there's anything to squeeze, if there's anything left in the lemon to squeeze. Is that how they say that? We've got to make sure that there's something there, to juice. Otherwise, you're working on something that really is wasting not just your time. Yeah, but the organization's time. Like, you guys, like, healthcare has plenty of other things to be working on. When something is dead, it's dead, it's dead. Like, sometimes you just gotta lay it to rest. It's like you look at something like a company come to you and they've got claims from like 5 years ago. Like, realistically, how much of that are you going to get reimbursed? Like, so yeah. All right, you have an introduction there, Lee. So a tribe wants to partner with you. I hope you guys are in the Facebook group. If you're
I'm
not,
the cleanup person, so I feel you, a tribe. I feel you.
Yeah, there's like something so satisfying about watching that AR get squeaky clean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
and then when you can actually get something out of the insurance company that someone else before you couldn't, icing, cherry on top.
Jacqueline, you asked a question that I don't know that I can answer, to get clients outside of the US. I've never had a client outside of the US. So we're actually do reverse. We are clients of someone outside of the US, I guess, if that makes sense. But so I do have friends that have worked with or done things with Canadian companies and Australian companies. I don't know anything about it though, so I don't want to speak like to something I don't know about. I'm sorry. If I meet someone that really wants to come on and talk about it, I will definitely bring them on to an episode so we can share trade secrets on there. So let's see. Yes, that is what. Here we go. Yes, that is one on a guide. Yeah, like a baseline, a template. Yay, awesome. Yeah, we'll go over it because it's fun stuff. And it's always getting better. Like, I mean, I am not a person who's like, oh, I've created this perfect thing. No one can ever do it. Like, I mean, listen, there's always improvement. That when an industry is constantly changing, like healthcare, there's nothing but constant improvement, because opportunities for improvement, because healthcare is just that. It's a mess, and it needs that. It needs improvement. So when a prospective doctor inquires for billing service, what are good questions to ask? Okay, I have this on my list of videos that needs to be made for recorded videos, though. So I maybe we could talk about it on the live, but I kind of think it's something that is a little bit more relevant for me. Just kind of run through the questions. There are a lot of very important questions to ask just to understand. Like what we're talking about here, like what's the process? Do you have things like quality assurance? Is there a process in play? Tell me about it. And I say that, don't like ask yes or no. It's like, tell me about this. Tell me about what you do. There's a lot of, it's important for them to articulate a little bit more about their structure to you, other than like the sell. Like they all want to brag about, oh, we collect this much in our percentage and our rate and blah, 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 blah. We're so awesome. Until you start talking about like real logistics about the business. So let me see. Cool. All right. Yeah. I love it when they network, when they chat too. I'm looking at some of the green room comments, I would call it, but the comments backstage. Yeah, I love it when you guys are networking and getting connected. It's beautiful. That is exactly, I mean, it's in the name. It's the Medical Billers Network. So there you go. Way to go for letting it come to life. And yeah, it's so good. I love it. Yay, Lee. I'm excited too. So listen, it's been an hour and I know Rose probably has to go tend to the little people that I'm sure they're probably climbing.
My living room is probably destroyed right about now.
I appreciate you for this conversation, though. It was a fun one.
Oh, yes, it's wonderful. I've enjoyed it. I enjoy being up here. It's nice to get to talk to people about my job who understand
Yeah.
the job.
Oh, let me say something real quick because I didn't mention just in really just a really quick kind of tie-in. One person that I really would love to have come on is actually pretty much my right hand, and he does work for the offshore team. There's a
I'd
couple
love
of
to
folks.
have him on.
Yeah. So we're gonna manifest that Sam will come on. Sam, maybe you'll rewatch this and we're calling you out. We
Come on,
want you
Sam.
on the live.
Here.
Yeah. Exactly. And our team's amazing, and we've worked with them, like Rose said, for a number of years now, and we love them very much. And they work so hard for us, and they are an extension of our team. We don't call them that company or those people or those. They are our team. So
I have my very own team, and I call them the C team
yeah.
because, because my last name, not because they're like crappy. But they are my team, and it's having that communication with them when you know who it is, and that's something else too. If you have a particular set of people that work on let's just say you have 5 providers out of the 20 that your company bills for. If you have a certain set of team members on your just those accounts, it makes the rapport that you have with the company is wonderful. You communicate with them, and they can know what you expect, and you will know what they're expecting of you. So keep that in mind as well.
Oh yeah, that's gold right there, Rose. Like the relationship building, like with your counterparts, like the team
Mhm.
that you are working with from day to day. So it's so important to like recognize that it's just like developing. You see, I called it. See, it's time. It's time. I know. I love it. You guys, we should have this conversation again. That was a really great one. Rose, thank you so much for your time. And children, I think you're muted or something, Rose. Oh, tell your kiddos thank you for letting us borrow you into the evening. It's already
No
8 o'clock
problem.
here on the East Coast.
It is.
I
These
love that.
days they get too short, I tell you.
Yeah, I think we need to. I love it. Yeah, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your presence. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you. We'll be back next Thursday. Stick around. And then we're going to be off for a couple weeks for the holidays. But I will be sure to keep you guys updated on what our schedule will be like during that holiday season. All right, my friends, have a beautiful evening. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.